Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Easton. I'm Reverend Sue Browning. I am the minister who is honored to serve at this congregation, and it's wonderful to be together today. In our opening slides, hopefully you saw that I created a traditional order of service, the kinds that we were using when we were meeting in person. It was fun to create, and it was something that was a good reminder of some of the things we value. Still possible to do in virtual services, but we have a little different pattern. So we're right in the middle of summer, and not surprisingly, things are hot and humid. There are bugs. There are the mosquito biting bugs. There are the lightning bugs that are just so beautiful. We are seeing the grass get a little bit browner, and it was delightful to have some rain, some cooler weather on Friday. We're also seeing the farm stands starting to fill up as more and more of our vegetables come through. So July's done and August is stretched before us. And for those of us who really appreciate summer, that really like the long days, the break in routine, and even with this odd year, we have had a break in routine. It's a lovely, lovely time of year. So my hope this morning is that we'll take some time to lean into the gentleness of summer, particularly this midsummer period, that we'll remember not to rush through this time. We offer thanks today to everyone who helped pull the service together, particularly Liz Hausburg, who is a new editor on the tech team and is doing her first solo edit of the service. And gratitude to all the people who are keeping the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Easton moving, for folks that are setting up Zoom teas and starting book groups and leading Soul Matters and managing the finances and the board and so much more. Gratitude for all that is being done. We want to keep this a vibrant community. We work to keep this a vibrant community, a place where we live into our values and we challenge ourselves. We remind ourselves what those values are, and we get our minds around what that is. A place where we care for one another, a place where we renew our souls. If you have questions about the congregation or about the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, here, if you have questions on Chestertown, I also serve up there. If you have questions on the faith tradition, please ask me, ask one of our members, check us out through the website, send us an email. We are enjoying getting to know new people in this time of virtual services. We are going to have board announcements today, and gratitude to Emily Cranwell, who will offer our board announcements this morning.
Hi all, this is Emily Cranwell, one of your co-presidents of the board, and I'm with you this morning for the announcements. First, I hope you'll stay with us after service today for the coffee hour. That's number one, and that happens at 11 o'clock on Sundays. Happening also Sunday, August 2nd, this evening at 6 p.m., there is going to be a book discussion on Zoom on white privilege. You can find more details in your UU Life newsletter. Also coming up on Wednesday, August 5th at 7 p.m., Reverend Sue is hosting check-ins to discuss anti-racism so that we can continue that work. Again, you can see those details in our newsletter. You should also watch your newsletter for upcoming information about our virtual annual meeting, which has been moved this year until Sunday, September 20th. So watch for information, because there's differences in the format and in how we're going to vote in order to make the whole meeting possible virtually. Thanks.
So I invite us now to find our center, to take in a deep breath, let out a breath. You take in that next breath, bring forth images that mean something to you for summer. It's in this spirit, in this midsummer moment, that we are going to worship together. Our chalice lighting words are from my colleague, Reverend Christine Robinson. We gather this hour as a people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope in celebration of the life we share together. I invite you now, wherever you are, to stand or remain seated as we share in saying the covenant of our fellowship. At the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Easton, we seek to nurture spiritual and intellectual growth for all ages and to be actively involved in community outreach and service, cherishing diversity and celebrating our oneness with all humanity. We covenant to support each other in the spirit of compassion, respect, and love. I invite us now into a time of meditation, a time of reflection. Again, bring forth the images of this season, your experiences in the past, your hopes, your dreams. Bring it forward, because this is sacred time. Each season is sacred in its own way. A reading this morning from Barbara Peskin. It's titled First Fire. High above you the sun shines, and beyond its glory the stars of night hide in the daytime sky. Below your feet worms out of their bodies remake soil, and in this center of the earth the core still simmers. Its first fire. Somewhere between the stars and the earth we live, and weep, we ask, and laugh, and answer. How can we not be amazed? Let light and darkness bless each other and bless us. Amen. Images. Images of the sun, the night skies, and the core. Hold those for now, for this week. One of the ways that we build community is we share our joys and sorrows, and we are now asking if you can send any joys and sorrows you had. You can email me and email the office by Thursday at noon. We're trying to get a little ahead on the editing. That would be wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and light our candles now, and then I will share what they represent. So our first candle is in honor of all the different folks that have been impacted by the virus. Those struggling with the illness, those who have recovered, the many workers in all sorts of roles that are helping out, and the many that are worried, that are anxious. The many ways this is impacting our lives. We light a candle. Our second candle is in gratitude for the Peace Camp program that happened over this past week. It was wonderful to have folks involved, albeit via Zoom, and some packages that were distributed, so a candle in that honor. And finally, a candle for everyone born in August. It is the first of the month, and we wish everyone who is a part of the fellowship, everyone who is joining us today who has a birthday in August, a happy birthday, and we are so glad that you are among us in your many ways, and that your gifts are part of who we all are. So happy birthday. So I ask us to take a moment to hold those joys that have been shared and those that remain in our hearts. For the many ways we build community, we are grateful. Amen and blessed be. Our fellowship is sustained by the contributions of many of our community. We come together to create the community we want and to make sure it's sustained. You can make financial contributions through your annual pledge. You can pay the pledge online or through checks. And we also are passing the plate. We pass the plate for anyone who is moved to give and to share what they can, to live out the value of generosity. It's a joy to be able to give when we can. And in services nowadays, we don't have an actual plate, so you will be able to give by pressing a button that's on the front of our website and share what you can to keep this vibrant community sustained. The morning offering will now be collected when you go ahead and push that button at some point today or this week. Our reading this morning is by Mary Oliver, and not surprising, the one I chose for this service is called The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So one of the harder parts of my routine, one of the challenging parts, is that I periodically write those little blurbs you see about what I'm going to preach about. I write them 2, 3, 4, sometimes weeks ahead, and it gives you a glimpse of what is the message I think might be helpful when we get together, what we might talk about. And while it's sometimes challenging for me to write this, to try to pick up all the different topics and styles and how you might approach a topic and sort of synthesize it, once it's done, it's wonderful because I have a guidepost, others working with me on the sermon, on music or different pieces that have some help. So the other thing about choosing a topic to preach on, part of the guidance that we get in all of our training is don't ignore what's in the forefront of people's minds. Preach to their lived experiences and their challenges. And so a month ago, this is what I wrote down for today. We are in our 5th month of dealing with the pandemic. We've adapted and we've been challenged. There have been losses and discoveries. What will the next few months look like, the next year? Join Rev. Sue Browning at this virtual service as we explore the dilemmas that come in this time of prolonged uncertainty. So, in my head, surely a message on prolonged uncertainty would be relevant. Just look at the headlines. Listen to just about every conversation that you're involved in your community, with your family. How could it not be relevant? So I submitted the blurb. It got published all the places that blurbs get published. It was done and off. But then I was in a conversation with a congregant last week, and we weren't talking about the sermon. I'm not sure she had even seen the blurb, but she said, I would love to hear something that is not about the pandemic. I need to think about something else. So then you have these second thoughts that we all have, and I wondered, might something else, whatever something else is, serve a greater need today? Might something else actually be a healthy spiritual focus for the next weeks, months, the year to come? Mary Oliver asks us, tell me what you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. Her question looms before us. It looms before us whether we're having a pandemic or not. So for today, I challenge you to put the pandemic down, or at least aside. Whether you're still one of these folks, I know there are folks out there, sometimes I'm one of those who is actually grateful for the way the pandemic has changed parts of my routine, as horrible as it is. Or if you're struggling with specific pandemic-related decisions, or if you are spending a lot of time screaming at the TV or at your computer, I challenge you, at least for this hour, to push the pandemic aside. Because I think we need to remind one another that in these times, however you want to describe the times, life is not on hold. Life is happening. Even if there are things we enjoy that we missed, or parts of our life we know that cannot happen during this period of prolonged uncertainty, life has not stopped. I think it's really important to let that sink in. Because if we feel like we're waiting for it, that thing we just put aside, if we're waiting for it to be done so we can get back to normal, or if we can get back to our new normal, I wonder if we're on a helpful track. I wonder if wanting to be in that waiting until it's done phase serves us well. What's your plan with your one wild and precious life? Or at least where's the direction you're headed right now? interesting questions to ask. And I've also wondered, where do we turn? Where do we turn to get support as we ask these hard questions? We've got our friends and our family in different places. But when we ask the question, how am I going to answer that? Here I'm going to boldly ask, have you prayed on it? Have you checked in with God? I know this is a recorded service. I know it actually goes up on YouTube, and I'm very aware that I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister. But I ask you to hang in with me for a minute here. I sense that in this next time period, however long this goes on, we are going to need a very varied and flexible toolkit to ask our big questions. So let's not throw anything out. Let's give prayer, God, or some other versions that you might think through a chance. Have you prayed on it? Have you checked in with God? For me, I see prayer as a time to make some space for careful thinking, of opening myself, of actually being intentional about opening myself to something well beyond myself, however you think of that broadest sense. I know in prayer, often it's silent, but I am silently venting. I'm trying to listen. Sometimes it's that still small voice within, maybe it's to the ancestors, wherever it is. It's a point of recentering and realigning. And mostly it's about that making time. Mary Oliver says, I don't know what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. So I ask us not to get too hung up on pinpointing terms and consider what we do to make time. Because I don't think of prayer as something where we go out, we make some big request, and somebody's going to come down and change the course of the virus, and there's going to be something because I happen to ask for it. But I do see, if I'm frustrated with a neighbor or something, in that prayer time, maybe I find a different center of patience, a different place of empathy. What is it that making time for a really distinctive type of paying attention, how might that serve you for now? Because I think in these periods of prolonged uncertainty, and we're there, just like we're in the middle of summer, we're in the middle of prolonged uncertainty. I think it's very easy to let ourselves be guided by fear or multiple fears. Making choices that are based on fear, we start circling around. It's hard. In her recent memoir, Becoming, Michelle Obama offers this: don't ever make decisions based on fear. Make decisions based on hope and possibility. Make decisions based on what should happen, not what shouldn't. So this prayer, this paying attention, it can help us name our fears, and it can help us each figure out what is our part of all the challenges that are out there to work through, and what is just not in our control. I know for me, I sometimes use the phrase, I check in with God. What's that is for me, it's not checking in with a person, but it feels a bit conversational to lift up my deepest values. What is the essence of living? What is it that I really care about that will bring us toward an ultimate good? So maybe prayer and conversations are not a fit for you, but how might you make some time? How might you make some time to find out where the forces of love, the forces of nature are guiding you? I'm just going to touch my computer for a minute so it turns back on. There we go. Maybe part of our shared work, whatever that process is for you, but I'm thinking that maybe part of our shared work in this period is to remind one another to name our fears, but also to resist being sucked up and being in their orbits. And I think there's something about being in midsummer that opens space uniquely. Can we use this time to see where hope and possibility are opened? Where do the gentle breezes take you? The new growth that still is coming forth. The The pandemic is going to need to be considered, but it doesn't need to control our lives. And I am hearing I'm hearing lots of joy on different ways that life is being recovered. I know I mentioned earlier that I prepared the order of service. I was actually missing our traditional UUFE service. And while we can't gather, I realized I could, at least for a week, prepare this order of service. I could put it up on the screen for folks. So I typed up my order of service, and I moved it around in the service a few times. I tried to figure out how to best incorporate the service. Sorry about that, Liz. But I was feeling connections. I looked at the last order of service that Linda had prepared, and it was on March 8th. It was sad, but I could recall more about our services, and it wasn't the same. But these are some of the ways I think we can sometimes recapture what we want. I hear about exercise classes that are resuming, and I know the Ladies' Tea has found the right time they like to connect, and they're opening up the space even more frequently. We have a Soul Matters group that's meeting, and it was lovely to hear that this month they met about joy. So I think part of what I'm thinking about is, how do we prevent the pandemic from always being in the forefront, to push it into the background fairly often? Because I think if we don't, we'll find ourselves in this waiting game. So gratitude for the conversation I had with this member that got me thinking a little bit differently. So what is this something else, though, we're going to talk about? So I did what you can do when you've got the internet and you're scanning things around, and I scanned other Unitarian Universalist websites. What were they talking about this summer? What were their topics? And I found, first of all, some of them, quite a few, big and small, don't have blurbs anymore. That was really interesting to observe. It's a practice that works for me in this congregation. So here's some of the topics that I found. America 2.0, picking up the pieces. Encouragement to spiritual growth in these challenging times. Life and love in the time of the coronavirus. And there was one I saw from a minister who I know is changing jobs, moving to a new large congregation. The way she titled the service was, "Well, this isn't what I wanted at all." So I understand we want the something else, and yet this is where a lot of hearts are drawn. And I also saw a fair number of sermons focusing on anti-racism. The most interesting something else I could find that was going on August 2nd in the wider UU world and in congregations that I knew was, there was a group doing an animal blessing. And that one struck me as something that reminds us that our animals need love. There's lots of other ways that we can be spending our time, and that we can widen our lens. And how do you do a blessing in these times? We'd have to figure that out, but those are the kinds of possibilities I can imagine. So what is the something else that you want to hear about? What might we explore together as religious community over the next week, months, and the year? Because we're doing that planning right now. So I ask you to check in with me, check in with Emily or Christina. What are your hopes and possibilities for the coming church year? How can we fill our lives with joy and curiosity? How do we keep doing this work of living? The crepe myrtles are in bloom. There is wild heather all along the road, and there's still more lightning bugs that are living out their lives. So I invite us to take these gentle images, to do an intentional pause, and to make space. To make space in the rhythms of summer for the pull of love. To make space for the way your life needs to unfold right now. May it be so, and blessed be. Our closing hymn today is hymn number 95, There is More Love Somewhere. There is more love somewhere. So as we finish out our service and you try to think of the something else, I invite you to next week's service. It's being led by UUFE member Ann Davis, and it is about our cartoons. It's about animation. It is taking us into a different creative level and figuring out how to use virtual services to open our hearts and minds there. So gratitude, Anne, for doing that service and for modeling the different ways we may work through these times. Our closing words today are from Tom Shade. My friends, there is a power at work in the universe. It works through human hands, but it was not made by human hands. It is a creative, sustaining, and transforming power, and we can trust that power with our lives. It will sustain us whenever we take a stand on the side of love, whenever we take a stand for peace and justice, whenever we take a risk. Trust in that power. We are together, held by that power. So I now extinguish our chalice. Go in peace. Go in love. Go knowing love surrounds you wherever you may go.